Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. If you don't know by now, I am Rachel Tintle and I am the owner and designer behind the Creative Siren. Now this week I have a tutorial for you that is one of my favorites. It was a challenge for me back then, and I hope that it won't be a challenge for you after this tutorial. So this week we will be going over how to make a crystal tumbler. Now you're gonna have to bear with me. It's gonna take some patience, I'm not gonna lie. Because each individual crystal here will be cut out by you. But I'm making it sound a lot more daunting than it is. I promise that you'll come out of this knowing a lot, and I really hope that you just overall enjoy this video. So without further ado, let's just jump right in. As always, we are starting off with a fully prepped tumbler. In this case, I'm using a 20-ounce slim tumbler for this design, and I've taped the tops and the bottoms of my cup. It's a personal preference. You certainly don't have to if you don't want to. I just really love a little bit of stainless steel to show through. So next, grab a tape measure, and we're gonna measure out the very tippy top of our tumbler. Now I'm measuring it around to 7 inches, and I'm gonna mark each side as well as the center. And once you've marked the top center, we're going to take that tape measure and guide it all the way down to the bottom, and then we're going to mark the bottom. We're not drawing a straight line, so your marking doesn't need to be perfect. It's just a reference point. After you've marked off your tumbler, we're going to grab some electrical tape just to act as a guide while we paint. So go ahead and tape the very outer edge of that first marking and take it all the way down to that center marking at the bottom. Try and make your line as straight as possible here, because it'll look weird if it's not super straight, but we'll cover it up later. And just do the same thing on the other side. So take your tape and take it to the very outside of that marking that you have there, and then diagonally all the way down to that center mark on the bottom. Okay, next up we're going to grab some black matte acrylic paint. Now we're only doing this one section at a time, and you'll see why, because we're going to use some flakes here and we don't want it to get everywhere. Plus, it's easier to tape off this little section in paint rather than put tape on top of the paint, because it could cause it to peel off. And we definitely don't ever want to use spray paint, because spray paint and polymer clay do not mix. So after your paint has fully dried, we're going to start using our Mica Flakes. I will have these Mica Flakes listed down in the description below, but they're absolutely my favorite. They're by Simply Sarah. And I'm using, they're both transparent flakes. So one is guppy and the other one is tetra. I will also use one called Rainbow Trout here in a little bit, and you'll see that, just to make this really pretty, like, opalescent look right on top of the black here. So the easiest way I've found to do this is to take just a little bit of Mod Podge, and you just want to do a really thin layer on the section that you want to add these chrome flakes. You can also use polyacrylic if you'd rather, but I seem to like Mod Podge. I go back and forth, to be honest. I don't really have like a favorite. Once you've fully brushed on your Mod Podge or your polyacrylic, whatever you decide to choose, take a fan brush and just lightly, very lightly dip it into your flakes and then dab that brush on top of your wet Mod Podge or polyacrylic. What I really like about the fan brushes is that they don't grab huge heaps, and you can be really light with it and really spread those chrome flakes all around, and they're so pretty. I just think that this is a lot easier to do rather than with a regular brush. And just be careful. You'll see here in the video that the flakes do fly everywhere, so try not to like sneeze while you're doing this, because then you'll just have a big mess of color shifting flakes just everywhere. So just a fair warning. You really want to make sure that the flakes kind of sit around randomly. It's okay if you get little clusters. I mean, realistically, it's all preference, but like here, I'm kind of pushing it around because I didn't like the clusters. I like them to sit kind of sporadically all over. So this is the part where I decided that I wanted to add a third dimension to this opalescent center, and I grabbed this transparent rainbow trout color from Simply Sarah. That way we get greens, blues, and it's like a pinky purple right in the middle here to really give it a good dynamic. And when you've got the center color looking exactly the way you want it, go ahead and seal it real quick with another layer of Mod Podge or polyacrylic. When your center is all dry, you can go ahead and peel off that tape that we initially put on very carefully, so that we can start painting the other side here. And just as we did in the center, we're going to grab our matte acrylic paint and finish painting that unpainted side. Now be careful here at your edges, just so that we don't get black right on top of those really gorgeous chameleon flakes. But if you happen to mess up just a little bit, it's okay, because we will be covering the center line. Now I'm adding a little bit of Mod Podge here on that center line, because just as we did in the center, we're going to add some gold flakes just in the middle with our fan brush. Just very gently dab that straight down the middle. It does not have to be even, just so it covers up that center line really well. And when you're done, go ahead and seal it once more with a thin layer of Mod Podge. We're going to do this on both sides. Now this is the fun part. We're going to start making our crystals by rolling out a small little snake of clay, and we're going to cut them no longer than an inch long. You really don't want these crystals to stick out too far. And we're going to shave down those edges to give us really sharp edges. Now you'll find that this is difficult with soft clay or freshly conditioned clay. So my tip here is to actually put your rolled out clay into the freezer for about 10 to 15 minutes. And it'll make it, it'll still be soft when you take it out, but it'll help give you those really good sharp edges. Now here I'm just cutting diagonally into the crystal so that it comes to a point. But always make sure for this design that you do cut off that point at the top, because you don't want to be leaving sharp edges for your design. And those little chunks that you did cut off, save those, and I'll show you why in just a second. So at this point, what I like to do is I like to grab my cup and I take my little crystal clusters, that's a tongue twister, and I'll start placing them onto the cup so that I kind of get an idea how I want them rearranged. Also, it'll give me a good idea as to how large I want my clusters. Now for these guys, I'm only doing 2 clusters, 1 on each side. You don't want them to be too big, but you also don't want them to be too small, because if you make them too small, they tend to look like little like awkward ears sticking out of the side of your cup. So you want a good cluster of, I'd say, no less than about 6 or 7. So you're gonna need a really good big handful of those little extra chunks. So I just wanted to show you real quick that we're gonna do kind of the same method that we did with making our crystals, but instead of just making the crystals, we're gonna keep cutting the whole thing into little chunks. So as before, shave off the sides of this so that you have a really good sharp edge on all of your little chunky pieces, and then just start cutting it diagonally, and then just don't stop. And just when you think that you have enough, do it again. You're gonna need a lot of these. When you're done cutting out your crystal clusters, go ahead and pull those little chunks that you cut off, and pull them off to the side, because we're actually gonna bake those to fill in the rest of the areas that around your crystals. Now for just right now, I've only made about 5 crystals here, but I think in total I made like 12 or 13. And like I always tell you guys, be sure to follow the directions on the back of your packaging exactly, because we don't want undercooked or burnt clay here. When your clay pieces are all cooled and baked, we're going to use this purple iris color by Apple Barrel, and we're going to paint our big crystals, just the big crystals. Now if you're in my Facebook group, I actually taught you guys how to make this little needle tool, and if not, no big deal, but I just found that it was just easier to stick that pin in the edge of my crystal and then paint it. But if you don't have a needle tool, that's no big deal. You can just grab it by the bottom. Just try and cover as much of the crystal as you possibly can. But if there are any bare pieces, we will cover them with the Mica Flakes. So here I'm going to be brushing my crystals with a little bit of polyacrylic. And then I'm actually going to be dipping them into my Mica Flakes. Now these are again both by Simply Sarah. This one is blue to red, I think, and then the one next to it, I can't remember, but I'll put it in the description below. But just very lightly brush that polyacrylic on there, and then just dip it and roll it around in those chrome flakes, and then take your fan brush and take off any excess that is on your crystal. And this will really push those flakes down so that you don't really get them flying everywhere. Now what's fun here is that sometimes I'll take the darker color and I'll dip it into this translucent too, and it'll just give a different hue. And I'll do all 3. That way none of my crystals look exactly the same. When you've painted and flaked all of your crystals, or your big crystals, we're going to take some E6000 and we're going to start gluing them on to that center crease area where your gold flakes are. And feel free to arrange them any which way you like. Just remember that crystals kind of poke out in all directions. They don't just grow straight up. So this part I always find kind of fun because you can stick them in, you know, going in so many different directions. And then this is where you're going to take those little chunky pieces, those raw pieces, and you're going to start filling in the rest of that line there. And just put them on kind of sporadically, but still in the line. You want them to look like they're growing, like they're baby crystals, and they're growing in all different directions, but they're growing in a path. And sometimes I find that it helps to grab some tweezers to help grab onto those really, really small pieces. I would suggest when you're putting on your E6000 to just put like maybe 1.5 inches in length at a time. That way your glue doesn't dry out before you get the rest of those little itty bitty raw pieces on there. When you've gotten all your pieces onto your cup and your glue's finished drying, we're going to take that purple iris color again, and this is where we're going to paint those raw pieces. Take a fine-tipped brush and just have at. Just remember to cover all edges of those since we have so many sharp edges. That way you don't leave, you know, that bare flesh-colored clay sticking out. Once your little chunky pieces are all dry, we're going to take some polyacrylic and we're going to very lightly cover all of those little pieces. You can just do a general glaze over the top, nothing too thick. And then you'll grab a fan brush and we're going to lightly tap those flakes right on top of those little pieces. And I like to interchange between that blue-red color and then the translucent, just like we did with the big crystal pieces. I find that it gives it some good dimension, and then again, each piece doesn't look the same because some pieces are darker than the other. Now you'll see here that those flakes are flying everywhere like always, and they're actually going to start to stick to that other black side there. I personally like it, and I'll actually rub some of those. I won't add extra flakes, but I'll rub the already existent flakes into the black. That way it just gives it a little extra sheen, and it helps tie the whole design together. Once all your crystals are done, we're going to give our cup a really quick, very light coat of epoxy. You'll notice here that I'm actually adding a very little epoxy. The only time that I feel like I'm adding a lot is when it comes to those crystals. I tend to kind of goop it on top of those crystals, just to be sure that I get all of those little crevices, especially in that big cluster on each side. And then hit it real quick with your heat gun. I know some of you guys use a torch. That's fine too. I just prefer my heat gun. Once your epoxy is fully cured, you can go ahead and add your decals. Now I have this manifest decal that I personally made, and I'll have it available in my Facebook group for anybody who would like to use it. And I'll go ahead and link the color of the vinyl that I used down in the description below. And in that centerpiece, I added this really cute crescent moon crystal decal that I found online, and I'll have that linked in the description below where you can get that as well. Once your decals are on, go ahead and add one more layer of epoxy. Just make sure that it's really thin. You don't want to lose the dimension in your crystals by adding too thick of a layer. Just enough to cover the cup one more time and cover any problem spots that you have. And then hit it again real quick with your heat gun. And there you have it, a beautiful crystal stainless steel tumbler. I hope you guys really enjoyed this video. I know this one is definitely one of my favorites to make, and hopefully it will quickly become one of your favorites. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so that you never miss another 3D tumbler tutorial. If you love this video, be sure to click here to see our last video. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss another tutorial. See you later. Bye!